Hey guys, good morning. I just Googled, dang it, StreamYard added something else. Okay, StreamYard has this thing where I don't know if you guys ever read the description of my videos, but there's a link that says something like, do you want to make videos like this too? And there's a link to StreamYard. And I mean, I can go in and like manually take it out, but I don't because it's a hassle. I just leave it. But now they have a little box that you can check or uncheck so you can take it out. So I did. But now there's a thing underneath my comments that says share your referral link. And it says new to streaming or looking to level up, check out StreamYard and get a $10 discount. Quit adding stuff. Nobody wants to use StreamYard anymore. See, now they're giving people money to use StreamYard. Because it sucks now. Jeez. That should be a hint if you have to pay people to use it. God. Anyway, as I was saying, so we were supposed to find out on the 8th, but I guess I misunderstood. The deadline for them to submit all the paperwork and motions or whatever was the 8th. So her decision wasn't the 8th. The deadline for everything was the 8th. So we don't know yet if Todd Mullins is getting a new trial. So her written decision will shortly be after the 8th. So I guess I just have to keep my eyes peeled for the decision. But it should be any day now. So, I don't know when the trial, like, I mean, they should, like, be ready to go to trial, right? Because they just did the post-conviction relief hearing, so they should have all their ducks in a row. I hope it's no time soon, though, because if it is, we're not going to watch it, because we got Karen Reed coming up. And according to Turtle Boy, who usually knows what he's talking about, the trial should be starting next Tuesday. So, Shadow, I just shut that door. You do this every time. You just want the door open. Can you say hi first, and then I'll open your door? Say hi. Hi. Say hi. Hi. Can you say hi? Hi, everybody. What are you looking at me for? Look at them. Okay, so today we are on part 5 of Detective Renteria's testimony. And I think he has, I want to say 8 parts. So we're a little over halfway through his testimony.
All right. You remain under oath, and you may proceed, Mr. Ford.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Renteria.
Good morning.
Just to pick up on one of the points that I talked about yesterday today regarding the fingernails.
Did you get a shirt already? Yeah. Oh, okay. Nancy says hi. He said hi back. This stupid link thing they put there is hiding part of the chat. I don't like it. See? Timu Gandalf. That was my idea.
About the term nanogram, what you said is 1 billionth of 1 gram. Basically, if we were to visualize what a billionth of a gram would be, we really couldn't see it, could we?
You couldn't see it. That's correct.
Okay, if a billionth of a gram of that would be subject could be on like a little piece of lint that's floating in the air. In other words, you could get that much DNA on that little piece of lint that could be floating in the air. Is that true?
Well, if it was, let's say, a skin flake, a good part of a skin that had a lot of cells in it, that would be a possibility.
Just a little particle floating in the air, like little dust that you see when the sunlight comes in, that type of stuff.
Well, I have no idea if you like for you what 1 gram is. A nickel. Everybody knows the size of a nickel. Makes 5 grams. Just the divide it up pieces, and to chop that up into a billion pieces would be
Onward TV stop.
nanogram.
to the right hand, did you get a result on that particular sample?
No, that particular sample gave me no detectable amounts of human DNA. Therefore, the test stopped at that point.
Okay, so
How was he lonely?
basically no DNA from Phil Spector and none from Lana Clarkson or anybody else. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so that was entirely negative. Is that correct?
No human DNA detected.
Now,
How was the man lonely? He was taking women home all the time. And then if they wanted to leave, he'd threaten them with a gun. What a weirdo. Jeez.
now we ended yesterday. We were talking a little bit about the cartridge casings, the live cartridge casings that you analyzed. And I'm going to mark next in order analysis and ask you to take a look at this, and I want to ask you some questions about it.
Quintuple J.
Showing you this exhibit, Mr. Renteria. Do you have your copy? I gave you a copy. I'm not sure if I gave you this one, but I think you do have it. Okay, very good. You see that 4J exhibit?
5J.
See 5J exhibit?
Is it supposed to be on the screen?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Got it.
That explains why he's smiling in all the pictures you see of him in prison. Because he wasn't lonely anymore. He had all those people in prison to be friends with.
I got to make sure it's accurate before I put it on the screen. So I wanted you to tell us whether that correctly sets forth your DNA typing results.
Yes, 5J. You gave me a copy yesterday, I believe, at the lunch hour, and it looks to be the original, where a copy I received at lunchtime.
Okay, and if we could have this table, 1C swabbies from 5 live rounds, if we could have that put on the board, and this is 5J. And essentially...
It's actually not 5J, maybe it's misleading. That would make it a people's exhibit. It's quintuple J.
Quintuple J. Okay, JJ. It's on the board now, Mr. Renteria, and on the top 2 rows, if we could isolate that for a minute and take a look at that, does that correctly set forth the reference samples for Lana Clarkson and Phil Spector that you reported in this case?
Well, after reviewing the copy in the identification of the item number for Lana Clarkson's blood, instead of 101, that should be 100.
Okay.
Yeah, that should tell you something about yourself. If you have to hold people at gunpoint for them to stay, you need to look at yourself if that's something you have to do to have people stay.
Okay, so basically her reference sample is 100 instead of 100.
That's right. And Phil Spector's identification number would be 101.
Okay, but as far as the typing, you talked about 2 types, one coming from mom, one coming from dad, and this would be an example of that as far as the known or the reference samples of each Lana Clarkson and Philip Spector at various DNA locations. Correct?
That's correct.
So, for example, let's just go through this so that the jury can kind of understand what we're doing. We'll go through this first column here and ask that be highlighted. And it has a number up there, D3S1358. And basically what that refers to is the location of the genetic marker on a particular chromosome. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
So D3 would be the 3rd chromosome at position S1358. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so basically at this particular location, Ms. Clarkson inherited a 15 and a 16, one from each parent. Is that true?
Yes.
And Mr. Spector, a 15 and an 18. He happened to be the same at one marker, but different at another. Is that true?
Yeah, the same at one type, but a different type at the other pair.
Okay, and then the 4th one down is the AMEL, and that's the sex marker that determines X and XY. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the sex identifying marker called amylogen, and here it's just abbreviated AMEL.
Okay. And then there are other markers, and there's a number of markers that can be tested, but each one are basically separate as far as your comparison that you do. In other words, you look at them all, but each one can stand or fall on their own. Is that true?
Yes.
And you gave an analogy yesterday about ABO typing, and that's basically a person's blood type, whether they're blood type A, blood type B, blood type O, or AB. That's what you're referring to. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And just as an example, a person can have a blood type of, let's say, blood type A, and if you test blood and it's a blood type B, that person would be excluded because at that particular marker, it would be impossible for that person to contribute that blood type B sample, correct?
Correct.
So even if they match it 5 other locations, if they have a different blood type, then you exclude them for all purposes. Is that true?
That's right. If there's no other reason why either is not seen, because let's say the sample was in poor condition or not a lot of DNA we had to work with at the beginning, that absolutely would be true. If the types are different and there's no reason for them to be different, we would exclude that person as a donor.
Okay, even if they matched at several other locations, just by coincidence, if they don't match at one, then they're excluded for all purposes, assuming it meets the criteria that you just explained.
That's correct.
Okay, now on this chart, quadruple J, we've got a picture of the 5 live rounds that you did the tips, that you swabbed the tips on. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then we've got a picture here that's been previously marked in evidence that shows the weapon at the scene, and it shows, it's hard to see on this particular picture, but it shows 1 fired round and the rest of the rounds that are in the gun at the time, that it was fully loaded at the time that this event occurred. That.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And when you were at the scene, Mr. Renteria, did you see the gun under Lana Clarkson's leg, or had it been removed by the time that you got there?
I recall it being in the position that the previous photos that we looked at yesterday, which was under her leg when I got there.
Okay, and then at some point in time, Detective Katz picked it up. This photograph, along with some others, were taken, and then thereafter the body was processed and things moved along, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I'd like to have a switch to People's number 99 put on the board, please. Oh, we had it. There we go. Now, this is a picture that exhibit number 99, People's number 99, that shows a gun that's the same type of weapon that's involved in this case that was found at the scene, the death scene. And it shows basically a front view, and you see that being the barrel, and then you see these little, they look like chambers that are behind the barrel. Do you know what that's called, that device that is holding those bullets?
That's called the cylinder.
Okay, a cylinder, and that's where you put the bullets in a gun. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And essentially, the testing that you were doing was to try to identify people that, or any DNA that's on the bullets. On the bullets. That was the test that you were doing. Is that correct?
No.
Okay, you were testing DNA from the bullet all around those bullets. Is that correct?
We might crash. It put the wrong comment on the screen, and now it won't let me take it off or put the right one up. Make sure your seatbelts are on because we might crash.
Correct.
Yeah, the purpose of the test was to see if there was any biological material, be blood, saliva, any type of tissue that would be very rich in cells that could have backspattered, is a term we use, come back from the body and hit that surface. So the purpose of our exam was to see if there was any backspatter material on the exposed portion of the bullet, which would have been exposed if the live rounds were in the position in the cylinder.
Okay, now there's a bullet that's behind this portion of the gun, another bullet called the void position. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we talked about that yesterday.
And
yes.
the top one would be the expended bullet. That would be a used bullet, so to speak. Is that correct?
A fired cartridge, yes.
Okay, and that void bullet, you swabbed that. Is that correct?
Yeah, again, as I explained yesterday, I swabbed all 5. I don't know which of the 5 was, using your term, the void bullet.
Okay, but that was included in the DNA collection and in the DNA testing that you did regarding the bullets. Is that true?
That's true.
Now, when you did your testing of the bullets, did you quantify, like you did with the fingernail, the amount of DNA that you recovered when you collected all the DNA and put it into the tubes that you just described when you testified yesterday?
Yes.
And did you get over 18 nanograms of DNA when you collected all of them?
Yes.
And essentially, you could do a test with approximately one, but you had you could get you had more than that. Is that true?
Yeah, our target amount of DNA in 2003 for the types of kits that we used, we wanted as a goal to get around 1.5 nanograms per sample. That's, if we had that much, we would amplify that much. But we definitely would be able to get results, if not all results, most, for just 1 nanogram of DNA. So this gave a total of around 18 nanograms, as you have said. So I would be able to do multiple tests if I needed to on that sample.
If we could have quadruple J back on the board, please.
Quintuple.
Quintuple. These are this on the right side of this exhibit are the 5 bullets that you swabbed. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay. And when you put all the DNA in your reaction and went through the copying step and the typing step, is that correct?
No.
Okay. Well, did you put enough in to get a result? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, if we could get the chart back and basically go to this particular genetic marker here. This location, and this would be chromosome 18, position S51. That would be the location of this genetic marker on the human chromosome. Is that true?
Position 51, the S actually means it's a single site DNA marker. It only occurs on one place on all the chromosomes. That's what the S means, single. So it would be site 51 on chromosome number 18.
In other words, it's just like a book. You can go to a chapter and then go to a page and then go to a sentence and you can find a particular word. That would be one way to explain what a genetic marker looks like.
That would be one way, yes.
Okay, and so at this particular location, we have Ms. Clarkson is a 1516. That's her type, correct?
Correct.
And that's called the genotype. In other words, the combination of the two. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then we have an 11 and a 15, and that would be Philip Spector from his reference sample. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And again, the same thing is true with reference to all genetic markers, is that you inherit one from your mother, one from your father. Is that true?
Yes.
And that if there is more than two genetic markers in a sample, it tells you that the evidence sample has to be, by definition, a mixture of more than one person's DNA. Is that correct?
Well, again, I think I explained this yesterday. In most cases, that is correct. However, there are some individuals that can have a third type at usually one particular DNA marker. But when we're looking at the entire profile, we're also looking at the reference samples of the individuals who may have donated the sample. And if that would be true, we would, most of the time, and not all the time, expect to see it in the same type of body fluid in the reference sample as the evidence.
For example, if you look at this particular result, and this is from the bullets from the gun, it has a 15 and 16, and that's the majority of the sample. Is that true?
Yes.
And then there's a 17 there that doesn't match up with Mr. Spector, and it doesn't match up with Lana Clarkson. Is that true?
That's correct.
And that would be foreign to both of them, because if Lana Clarkson had some abnormality and had that marker, you'd see it in her reference sample,
Travis said hi.
as well as other samples that were consistent with her. Is that true?
That's what I would expect, yes.
Okay, so you can exclude that unusual possibility from this particular analysis. Is that true, Mr.
Yes,
Rentia?
that's correct.
Okay, so by definition then, that the DNA on the bullets had to be a mixture. Is that correct?
Yes.
And it would be a mixture of somebody else other than Philip Spector and Lana Clarkson. Is that true?
That's true.
And essentially, the test that, and you talked about mixtures at length yesterday, it has the capability of showing two people's DNA on a particular item. There's nothing inconsistent with this type of testing that would show that. Is that true?
That's right. It's consistent, like I said yesterday, with two donors, Lana Clarkson being the major donor. Phil Spector is excluded. as giving that 17. So it had to come from somebody else. Very small amount, but definitely a second DNA source.
And Mr. Renteria, when you use the word excluded, is there any equivocation or is that something that's positive in the science of DNA testing?
That's right.
Okay, it's positive. There's no other explanation. Excluded means excluded to beyond a shadow of a doubt. Somebody's excluded.
Yeah, that 17 did not come from Phil Spector.
Beyond a shadow of a doubt, it did not come from him under any circumstances.
Yes.
Now, if we could now talk a little bit about the nails. We talked about these fingernail scrapings. But in addition to that, you tested some DNA purportedly from a broken nail kit. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you saw pictures of this broken nail before the nail was taken off and this kit was basically put together or collected. Is that true?
I don't recall looking at the pictures before. I sampled that particular item again after Dr. Harold did the screening of it, and I would have seen the broken nail. It would be in front of me, obviously, because I'm sampling it at that time.
Okay, and that's where the nail is actually excised or cut out or off the decedent, in this case, Miss Clarkson. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. What happened at the coroner's office, they removed the nail from the thumb.
Okay, and they have a special kit that they use to collect broken nails so that it could be treated separately than the rest of the nails. Is that your understanding, Mr. Renteria?
That's my understanding.
Okay, and you've run into those types of samples before, is that correct?
Yes.
And the idea is to, you're going to see presumably some DNA from the decedent on that nail because that's where it was taken from. So that wouldn't be unexpected, would it?
Yeah, most of the time you are, especially if the nails are cut close to the actual finger. When the coroner's office does their clippings or even their scrapings, you're probably going to get material from the victim themselves if it's very close to the finger. If somebody has longer nails, there are occasions, and I think it even happened here on the right hand scrapings, where there wasn't enough material, even from the victim, to get a profile.
Okay. Then the idea here with the broken nails, just like the regular nail scrapings, is you're looking for foreign material, let's say skin or blood that doesn't come from the victim that you could maybe associate with some other person. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, so you had to actually collect this material. Isn't that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay, and did you do any type of presumptive blood test on your swab that you used to collect material from this broken nail bit?
No, as I stated yesterday, Dr. Lynn Harold did the screening prior to my collection.
Okay.
So I did not do a KM test.
And negative, then that might suggest that you, as to some samples, you might not go forward. But in this case, if you're looking for like a little bit of tissue, you might still go forward. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay, so you're looking for foreign material. And did you get any DNA from this particular broken nail sample?
Yes.
And did you get about a lot of DNA from this sample, like 44 nanograms?
I'll have to refer to my case file.
Okay, if you want to do
I'm not
that.
sure the exact amount.
Okay, I believe in your bench notes, it's at page 433.
Okay. I believe that sample's identified as 85B as in boy. And if I could use a calculator very quick to get the right amount. That's right. The total amount of DNA I recovered from that sample before any quantitation or amplification was performed was 44 nanograms.
Okay. And so that's clearly enough to do a DNA test under your minimum criteria of 1 nanogram. Is that correct?
Clearly.
Okay. And did you develop a genetic profile from that broken nail? In other words, were you able to analyze the DNA that you put into the sample, copy it, and then come with a result that could be compared to another person?
Yes.
And did that result, did it compare and match up at each genetic marker to Lana Clarkson and only Lana Clarkson, to the exclusion of any other people in the world?
Yes, that profile was consistent with a single source, and that source, the profile matched the DNA profile from Lana Clarkson.
And there were no other genetic markers that were inconsistent with Lana Clarkson in that sample, is that correct?
That's correct.
They all went to her. Each one matched to her at each position that you tested, is that true?
Yes.
And as to Philip Spector, as to all alleles or genetic markers that he had that were inconsistent with Miss Clarkson, in other words, where he differed, those were not identified in the sample at all. Is that true?
That's correct.
And so he was, to use your words, eliminated. Is that correct?
He is not the source of that DNA profile.
He would be eliminated as a contributor of that DNA that went into that testing from the broken nail. Is that true?
Yes.
Eliminated beyond any question, beyond any shadow of a doubt. Is that true?
Yes.
Now, when you, after you got done with doing some work on the bullets, you also tested the gun, a .38 caliber gun. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you talked a little bit about that yesterday, and you testified that you looked at certain portions of the gun and took samples from various different areas of the weapon. Is that correct, the gun?
That's right. Myself and Dr. Harold together chose different areas on the gun that would go further for DNA processing.
And it was your testimony, correct me if I'm wrong, that the gun had what appeared to you to have visible blood on it, or substances that you thought were blood. Is that true?
Yes, there were obvious areas, especially around the handle, where were blood type smears that you could see just with your naked eye.
And you actually, in order to confirm that, you actually did a Kasselmeyer test on those areas that you chose to test to confirm that there appeared to be blood there that had a chemical reaction. Is that correct?
Yes, on some of the areas, in fact, the original areas that I collected, again, in the presence of Dr. Harold, I did do the Kasselmeyer test, the KM test.
Okay. And with reference to the gun, if we could have exhibit next in order, which would be quadruple K?
Quintuple K.
Quintuple K. Put on the board. I'm going to show you a picture of a sight of a gun and ask you if you recognize this picture. Quintuple K. Do you recognize what that purports to be?
Well, there's no identifying markers as far as a DR number or item number, but it looks to be a close-up picture of a front sight of a gun that we're speaking about.
Okay, and for the record, Mr. Jackson, I will stipulate that this is the weapon, the gun that was recovered from the scene on February 3rd, 2003.
So stipulated?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. The jury will accept that as a proven fact.
When you looked at the gun, you saw some white material on the gun. Is that correct, in a particular location? Is that accurate?
Yes, if you're looking at this photo here, Quin K, I guess.
Quin K.
On the right side, it almost looks like a slope of a mountain. On the right side of the picture, about midway, or you see a serrated area, and about midway in that serrated area, you obviously see some whitish material. That's what I noticed when I first opened the box, that this was probably had some evidentiary value, and that's when I didn't touch it at that point, had it photographed, then delivered it to Dr. Harold.
Okay, and this is the white material that you're talking about, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, is this the serrated edge? Is it the sight of the gun, part of the sighting mechanism of the gun?
Yeah, I believe that's called the front sight. It's the rear side of the front sight, which would be almost to the very edge of the barrel of the gun up on top.
Okay, if we could have the entire Quinn K exhibit. This portion it would be the front of the gun. This would be towards the back. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Going from left to right would be the front, from the front to the back. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay, so right about here is where the bullet comes out, the muzzle of the gun. Is that correct?
Yes, on the left side of that photo.
Okay, now you did some DNA testing of this particular area. Is that true?
Yes.
And when you did your DNA testing, did you get a result that you reported in your laboratory, when you published a laboratory report?
Yes. Yes, I did. May I refer to my report?
Certainly.
Yes, that particular sample, once the white material was removed by Dr. Harold for analysis that she would have performed, we sampled that particular area, which we identified as 1F as in Frank. It yielded a DNA profile that matched the DNA profile from Lana Clarkson.
Okay, and when you say it matched at every location that was tested, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and were there any foreign DNA types detected at any location that you tested?
No.
And there was absolutely no DNA from any other person other than Lana Clarkson in that sample that you tested, is that correct?
That's correct. None detected.
And again, Philip Spector was excluded from contributing any of the DNA from that sample taken from the site of the gun, is that true?
That's true.
Now, Mr. Renteria, when you swabbed the gun, you swabbed some areas that were not obviously bloodstained. Is that true?
The areas I swabbed again was Dr. Harold and I worked side by side, and if she identified certain areas that microscopically were consistent with having blood on them, those areas would have been swabbed. I may or may not have KM'd them, but they would have been sampled. And our goal was to get different areas or different representations all around the gun, the handle, the barrel, the cylinder, to see if we can find any DNA or attribute a source to any blood that might be present.
Okay. Do you recall on or about September the 9th of 2004 being called before a grand jury here in Los Angeles County relating to your testing in this case?
Yes.
Do you recall giving testimony of some of your results similar to the testimony you're giving here today in court?
Yes, I do.
Do you recall before you gave that testimony that you were, as you were in this case, you were given an oath to as a witness?
Yes.
Okay, and you recall just being asked questions by the representative of the district attorney's office and also some of the grand jurors?
Correct.
Okay, do you recall being asked by the representative of the district attorney's office this question when you, page 617, and it goes over to 618. When you obtained samples from the gun, did you sample any of the areas that appeared not to have bloodstains, or did you just sample areas that appeared to be bloodstains? And you remember giving this answer to that question. I did sample some areas that did not appear to be bloodstains. Question, did you obtain results on any of those? Answer, yes. Question, were those items that you have already talked about, or are those additional items? Those are the items I already talked about. Do you recall giving that testimony?
Yes.
Okay, and how many different locations on the gun did you test and do DNA testing?
7.
Okay, and as to those 7 locations, did the genetic markers all come back to Lana Clarkson?
Referring to my report, Yeah, I believe we covered this yesterday. Of the 7, 2 of the samples yielded human DNA, but an insufficient amount to move on for dating. So that left 5. And of the 5, 4 of them yielded DNA consistent with originating from a single source, and the DNA profile from those 4 samples matched the DNA profile for Lana Clarkson.
Okay, go ahead.
The 5th one, yeah, that was just 4.
Okay.
The 5th one was consistent with a mixture, very low minor donor as far as the secondary contributor. The major donor is consistent with Lana Clarkson, like the other 4 samples, a full profile. And the only indication that there was other DNA there from another source, and again, we discussed this yesterday, was a Y type at amylogenin, which would tell us, the only thing it'll tell us is that the small amount of secondary DNA there was from a male. There was no other types in any other DNA markers to give any other information as to who that male donor may be.
Now, Mr. Renteria, when you testified before the grand jury, you talked about that Y at that one sample, you talked about there possibly being some male DNA there. Is that correct?
I don't recall my exact wording, but I guess I would have said that, yes.
And when you use the word possible, there could be other explanations for why the Y is there, because it was at extremely low levels. In other words, sometimes you use the term artifact.
Yeah, if this was called the Y, based on my analysis of the DNA data from that sample, and also we have a process where another analyst will review the data just to make sure that we don't make any mistakes as the original analyst. And that second analyst, my tech reviewer, whose her name is Giselle Levine, she also agreed that that was a Y and not an artifact.
Okay,
So
now,
I would have to say at this point that that was a Y and not an artifact.
okay, when you do DNA testing, do you ever repeat a sample to try to confirm it if there's something that's sort of on the edge of detectability?
Yes.
Okay, and this particular sample that you looked at was given a particular number, is that correct?
Yes, it was.
1J would be your sample number, is that true?
That's true.
Okay, and when you did your original testing of 1J, your laboratory has a threshold level by which you have to get above in order to report a positive result, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and the way that the testing works is that the DNA is measured using a kind of a yardstick or a measuring system known as RFUs. Is that correct?
Yes. RFUs, which stands for relative fluorescent units.
And essentially, when you put the DNA in the machine to analyze it, the type and the amount, it's quantified by the RFUs, by the relative fluorescent units. Is that a simple way to explain it?
Yes. The larger the number of the RFUs is directly proportional to how much of that particular DNA is present.
And when you test DNA, your laboratory has to set a particular level by which it has to meet in order for there to be a reportable result. Your own laboratory has to do that.
That's correct. Any lab doing DNA will set a particular level of where a activity at a particular DNA marker has to pass in order to report it.
Okay, and they use this RFU level in order, that's the mark that they set, a particular height, for lack of a better word.
Yes.
And some laboratories use 150, some use 100, some even go lower. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, and in your laboratory, you actually go down to 75. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and in one of the samples you did for item 1J, you actually got 75 for this Y marker. Is that true?
75 or above, otherwise it wouldn't be in the report.
Okay, can you tell us what the RFU level was from your data at this point?
I don't know if I have that printed out in the DNA plot. I'd have to look at my case file.
Okay, we'll just do that a little later. Let me do this. Let me show you what I'll ask to be marked Quinn next in order.
L.
He knows.
Quinn L.
Yes.
130. I'm going to show you a document that's Quinn L. Ask if you recognize what that might be.
Yes, this appears to be a color copy of one of my case pages. It has my initials at the bottom and a case number, a page number.
Okay, and could you, is this part of your laboratory records and your data that you, that was created in this case regarding the testing involving this case?
Yes.
Okay, could we have this published for purposes of the jury?
Yes.
Quinn L. Oh, we're going to have to use the L. Okay, and this is known as an electropharogram, is that correct?
Yes.
And essentially, it's a printout of your data from DNA testing that you do. Basically, it has certain samples, and this is how you read the data, isn't that correct?
It's a printout. We actually read the data on a computer screen, but to capture it in a hard copy so we have something to put in the notes, we obviously save the electronic data. We will print it out in this type of fashion.
Okay, so let's start at the top. The first one is sort of a ladder that is used to make sure everything is measuring correctly. Is that correct?
Yes.
So the first line, kind of the first part of the bar graph, shows all the genetic types and their relative locations all in one sample, basically. Is that true?
Yeah, what you're looking at in the very top of this exhibit is one of two kits that are used. This kit is called Cofiler, Cofiler, and this shows only one particular color within Cofiler. It depicts amylogenin, which is on the far left. And on the ladder, you can see an X and Y type. Then three other DNA markers that are present in that particular kit.
Okay, so this is just one bit of the data that includes those genetic markers that you just talked about. Actually, four of them: the sex one, the X and Y, correct?
Yes.
Okay, boy DNA, girl DNA. Basically, that's the question that you're answering with that test. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, then you have, in this case, you've got the genetic marker, THO1, and then you have what's called TPOX, and then CSF1PO. Is that correct?
Yes.
These are all different genetic markers that vary within the human population. Is that correct?
Yes.
And basically, the first line, you put that on, that gets run so that you know that you can then compare the samples with that ladder. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so for example, you know on the top line, you know the X and the Y are working correctly because you see the X and the Y that you know you put in the test are accurately reported. Is that correct?
That's part of the ladder, yes, that both the X and Y are present.
Okay, and then every other marker that kind of deal with this particular system are represented. In fact, if that's not there, if there's something missing, you know there's a problem and you have to explain that. Isn't that correct?
In the ladder, that's correct.
Okay.
We expect to see the types that the manufacturer puts in the ladder every time we run the ladder. If it's not there, then we would have to look a little closer into the data to see why that happened.
That's a problem that would have to be investigated. So the first thing you do when you look at every printout or every page on the computer is you check to make sure the ladder is all complete. And you actually put your initials and put a little check mark there over to the right. Isn't that true?
Yes.
Okay, and so that starts it and says, okay, everything seems to be working okay. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you then go to the evidence samples that are marked by a particular number. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so let's go to the first evidence sample, which is right below the ladder. And if we could highlight that with the markers and so forth. Well, I forgot, we're not on the computer. These are the markers, and this is the result here in this first bar. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, and you said this was Cofiler?
That's right. One of the two kits used, a Cofiler.
Okay, so I put Cofiler there. Is that basically the data from at least these markers that correctly show the results as to these particular locations?
Yes.
Okay, and the next one is 1J.
Correct.
This line right here. And that is the area what part of the gun did we look at?
The area we've been talking,
You have the left handle, is that correct?
that's right, the left side of the wood grip of the gun.
Okay, and you actually ran this sample in this co-filer system, then you also ran it in another system called Profiler, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that way you got more of a read as to both of them, is that true?
That's right. Well, again, when we have enough DNA in a sample, back in 2003, we would routinely run that sample in both kits to get the most genetic information from that sample.
And when you ran it in this particular system, looking at 1J, you report out, at least this data shows it has X, in other words, female DNA only in this particular system. Is that true?
That's right. For this one kit, co-filer, the only callable type was X.
Okay, and all of these markers beyond that are all exactly consistent with Lana Clarkson. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And as to these markers here and all the other markers that you tested in co-filer, they all came back to Lana Clarkson to the exclusion of anybody else in the human population. Is that also true?
Yes.
And this is the, all of these markers are consistent with her and not consistent with Mr. Spector. He would be excluded. Is that correct in the co-filer system?
Correct.
Okay, and this would be the left grip of the gun, and we have a chart of that, and I would ask that it be, I show it to you, and then we put that up and we keep this right where it is for now. You have a copy of it, Mr. Renteria. I think I gave you a copy of a chart with a grip. Do you have that handy?
Yes, I do.
Okay, could we have this Mark Quinn next in order?
M.
Okay, you recognize what this purports to be?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have that
Okay,
version.
let me show it to you.
Yeah, you gave me this one.
Okay, let me give you Quinn M as a, why don't we take this down for a moment, let you look at that first to make sure it's correct, with the exception as to the reference sample.
Okay, looking at the chart that you reprinted, I guess, from my table.
Yeah, that was my intention, and again, does it appear to be accurate except for the reference sample should be 100 versus 101?
Well, there's that, and then there's also a, it looks like at DNA marker D18, which is just to the right of amylogen, and on the table, the correct typing should have been 10 greater than 17.
Okay.
You put 10 comma 17.
Okay, so the two markers that were identified there were 10 and 17, but you sometimes put a little or little, what do you call that little arrow thing?
Inside.
Okay.
And what it means is that one type is taller or greater amounts than the second type.
Okay, and essentially you just, that's part of the way that you report your results. If you notice something in the data that shows that there's a little more of one type than another, is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's not something that is unusual in developing data from samples. In other words, you see that sometimes. Is that true?
Yes.
Does that have anything to do with the reliability of your results?
No.
Okay, and does it have anything to do with the validity or the calls that you make in declaring something to be a match or an exclusion, whatever the case may be?
No, when we're dealing with a single source sample, sometimes that happens where even though it's from one person and that person has two types at a DNA marker, there is on occasion, especially with evidence samples and sometimes even with reference samples, that one of the types will just end up coming out a little higher than the second type from that person. But we would indicate that somehow with the greater than, less than, or sometimes even in parentheses if the difference is even greater than that. So it is common.
Okay, if we could have that Quinn K put up then, and
And sir, I'm also going to correct the 100 for the
Sure.
victim sample.
okay, very good. Quinn N. Excuse me. Now, you recognize these two pictures that are associated with this exhibit, the picture of the gun, is that true?
Yes,
And the picture of the left handle area or a left view of the gun, is that correct?
that's correct.
Okay, and this is the gun that you looked at with Dr. Harold, is that true?
Yes,
And you talked about blood and it wiping off if it was wet and so forth, but blood can also come off if it's dried, it can flake off, isn't that true?
yeah, if there's a heavy concentration of blood and it's on a fairly smooth type of surface, in other words, not a porous surface, there is occasions where the blood can actually flake off of the smooth surface and fall free from it.
Okay, now, this particular profile, and let's for purposes of our discussion right now, we'll talk about the X and the Y result in a few minutes, but all of the genetic markers that were found on the grip of the gun were consistent with Lana Clarkson, is that correct?
All right, Mr. Ford, you have to leave. Thank you for your cross, though.
I think you have privacy, Ron. As I was saying, all of the genetic markers are consistent with Lana Clarkson throughout this profile, the markers that individualize people within the population. And again, the sex marker doesn't really individualize, does it?
It groups people into a sex. So if you don't count amylogenin, if this is your scenario, then all of the types seen other than amylogenin are consistent with coming from Lana Clarkson.
Okay. And in other words, all the amylogenin or the boy-girl DNA says is there some boy or girl DNA there in all the different amounts. Is that correct?
That's right, female and male.
Okay.
And this is consistent with, the major source, which again is Lana Clarkson being female. And there's a small amount of male DNA present.
Okay. And in your table of results here, you put the Y there in parentheses, then you put an asterisk by it. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what that asterisk means is that you ran the sample twice in two different systems, and in one system you didn't get the Y, and the other system you got the Y.
Right. What it means is in one system, the Y was callable, and in the other system, it was below threshold and we weren't able to call it. So that's just putting a flag on the report to let the reader know we didn't get the same in both systems, but there was still enough data for us to call that a small amount of Y because it did come up in one system.
Okay. And I looked at, have you had a chance to determine how large of a level the Y was in the system that it was positive in?
No.
Okay. Now, in all the other samples on the gun, you found no Y DNA at all. Is that true?
That's true.
And you tested them in both systems, no Y DNA anywhere else on the gun. Isn't that true?
That is true.
And you talked about amounts of DNA to get a result. It would take, well, let me ask you this question. The type of testing that you do, Mr. Renteria, is so sensitive that you have to take special precautions to avoid getting your DNA involved in the test when you're doing the testing process. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you know as an analyst that that's something that's very important to do. And you talked about all the things that you do yesterday, gloves, things of that nature. Isn't that correct?
That's right. We do. We take as many measures as we can. So the person actually doing the test doesn't introduce their own DNA into the sample.
Okay. And how important is that? In other words, why is that important?
Well, if you got your DNA into every single sample, it would be very hard, obviously, to try to interpret the results. But again, this test is very sensitive, and on occasion, it does occur, and it does occur in our laboratory as well as other laboratories in the country, that the analyst's DNA can show up in a particular sample. Now, if it shows up in all the samples, then you got a serious problem. There's something going on where your DNA, for whatever reason, is maybe in a common reagent and it's been introduced into all samples, and that would be a serious problem. But there's also occasions where maybe in one particular sample, for whatever reason or however it occurs, it could be skin cell or possibly a saliva cell, gets into a single tube, and you can come up with your type in that one particular tube. It's not as serious as the first scenario that I demonstrated. And on occasion, when that does happen and we can attribute a source to that contamination, we're still able to move forward and use the results on the other samples, especially if all the other controls come out as expected.
Okay. And basically, you can contaminate one sample, either a lot or a little. It's really impossible to tell how much contamination occurs if you make a finding that that's occurred. Isn't that true?
Well, you could always, we quantitate of DNA, then we could say a little DNA got there. If you had a sample that had no DNA or supposed to have no DNA, and all of a sudden you have, like the one example you brought up, 44 nanograms of DNA, then we know a lot of DNA got in that particular sample. So you can tell if it's a lot or a little.
Okay. And when you talk about contamination and things of that nature, you talked about dandruff and stuff that comes from the eyes, the mouth, but also sweat. Sweat has DNA in it, and sometimes that can get transferred quite easily. Is that true?
Yeah, sweat could have skin cells, just mixed in with it, and within those cells would be the DNA.
Okay, in this particular test run that you did you have a blank sample that you ran that had no DNA in it, that you took through all of the steps, 1 through 5, as a control? Did you have one of those samples in the same run that you did this particular gun sample along with the other gun samples?
Yes.
And the same with the bullets, is that correct?
That's correct.
And this particular sample that you ran has a name to it called a reagent blank, is that correct?
Yes.
That's where you put all the chemicals in it and you take it through the same steps, and then at the end, you should get no result because it's a blank. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So it's just like a gun. You can fire it, but no bullet comes out. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And in this particular case, a bullet came out of this particular blank sample. Is that true?
No.
Did the reagent blank show a genetic profile?
No.
Did you have any profile that was positive in your testing, a reagent blank profile?
Yes, in another set, not this particular set.
Okay, so let's go to that set. It was a reagent blank 3, is that correct?
I'm not sure the designation, but one of the particular sets of extractions that I did, and there were multiple because there was a lot of evidence looked at in this case, one of the reagent batch in one of the sets showed my DNA being present in that particular tube.
And close to 1 nanogram, is that true?
I'd have to look at the quantitation for that.
Okay, and that type of event is of such magnitude that you have to actually report that to your accrediting organization that you talked about yesterday. Is that true?
No.
Is that something you have to document in your laboratory so that when an audit is done, they can check to see whether things like that have occurred?
Yes, we call that unexpected results because it's not expected to have that. And we have a special form that we fill out. So when we do get audited by outside agencies, they usually will ask for that binder to just try to get a feel if a laboratory is having excessive unexpected results or if they're kind of in line with other laboratories. So the documents are kept for an inspection, but we don't have to report that immediately to, in this case, ASCLD Lab, our accreditation body.
Okay, and how many times has that happened to you?
This was actually my very first time since doing DNA in 1994. This was my first event to have my DNA show up in one test tube. And since then, I think it's happened one additional time, so for a total of 2.
Okay, and has it happened to other analysts in your laboratory?
Yes, again, laboratories as big as ours and as many analysts that we have and as many extractions that we go through, you're going to have contamination events. Okay. That's why we have the controls, is to try to figure out what happened. Based on the types that we find, we can either still move forward with the data, or there's some occasions, especially if you can't attribute that DNA type to any source, where we can't count on the data and the entire set has to be done over. You just can't trust those particular results. And that has happened.
And you've actually, in this particular case, you came to the conclusion that you could trust the results. Is that correct?
Yeah, for various reasons, yes.
Okay, and that's because you didn't see your profile in other samples. Is that correct?
That's right. The only contaminating DNA was in that one single reagent batch tube within that set. So I had confidence, because I didn't see my types in the other samples, that the other samples were fine. The amplification control, the negative amplification control, and the positive control gave consistent results that we would expect. So it was, in my opinion, as well as others in the laboratory, because we kind of conferred on this, to how to move forward, that this was not a serious problem and that we could move forward with the data without having to consume any additional samples from that set.
Okay, and what were the other samples that were tested in that set? If you could just give well, let me ask you this question. In this particular contamination, where your DNA ended up in this blank, this particular set, there was enough DNA where you actually not only got a reading on the male-female marker, is that correct? You got a reading there that your DNA was from a male,
yeah,
I would assume.
What I recall, the amount of DNA I had was small in that sample. In fact, I was only able to do the one test kit and not both test kits for that particular sample.
Okay, and how many genetic markers did you identify from yourself in this blank sample?
I believe from the first kit, which looks at 9 different markers plus amylogenin, I believe I was able to find mine types in all 9.
And did you report that out in your report, your 9 different types?
Let me check if I did. I know I put it in words that the reagent batch gave unexpected results, but however, that DNA profile was consistent with the analyst performance.
It always amazes me that none of the lawyers ever go, well, you amplified it, so you altered it in some way. I mean, I know they have to amplify it because DNA is teeny, teeny, tiny. You know, when they get just a tiny little, smear off of a blood stain, right? I know it has to be done to be analyzed. And it makes sense to me, but I always think that some lawyer is going to get up there and go, well, you had to amplify it, so you altered it. And that could have changed the results, but they never do. And it always amazes me that they don't do that. They just, I guess they get it that has to be done that way, but I just expect some shady lawyer to get up there and try to use that as a means to say your test was wrong.
The test, which was me, and because I don't really want my DNA profile published, I don't know if I actually put it in the table.
Okay, next in order.
And
Quinn N. showing you Quinn N. I'm going to just show this to you. It's something that I typed. If this is comports with your DNA profile that you typed up in the reagent file.
I'll have to go to my case file to see. I don't have my types memorized.
Oh, okay.
So
I thought maybe you did. I apologize. At the break, maybe you could check that. Let's not take the time now
okay.
when the jury's here. Let's do this though. Let's do two things. Verify that that's your profile, and also verify the amount of DNA that was in the profile or in the that you quantified. And then what I'm going to ask you once you do that is to answer this question: to get a little bit of why DNA without a profile would you need much less contamination. That's sort of where I'm going with that, so that if you can think about that when we go forward.
Can you reword that last part?
The last part is that you had your full profile in one system that was the result of an inadvertent contamination that didn't spoil the whole testing process, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is it possible to have less contamination and just see the Y marker and not the rest of the markers like you had?
I see what you mean. Yes.
Okay. All right. Now, the next in order would be Quinn.
Oh,
What was the description of Clinton?
well, it's a document. I didn't.
It is a genetic profile
Just what I would have said.
from the reagent bank, RB3 genetic profile.
The chart?
Yes, it's a chart. Thank you. Mr. Renteria, I'm showing you Quinn O, and it is a chart with some pictures, similar to some of the other ones. And ask if you recognize what this is.
Yes, this appears to be a photograph, a closer-up photograph of the eyelashes that were found on the toilet.
I think he needs new glasses. You see the way he's holding that paper? Way out here.
Tank lid in the downstairs bathroom.
Okay, and does it also show the reference sample results for Mr. Spector and Ms. Clarkson?
Yes.
And with the exception of the 101, as far as Ms. Clarkson, is the reference sample correct? And the same would be for Mr. Spector?
Again, I'll have to look at the table. Yes, the references look fine.
Okay, and now look at the, this was characterized as item 13 in the collection process, correct?
Yes. Yes, the types that you typed in appear to be correct.
Okay, if we could have this exhibit Quinn O put on the overhead. Okay, so looking at this particular table of STR DNA results as to this one sample only, basically, just like with the other ones, we have the bottom table shows the evidence item with a picture of the eyelashes. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the eyelashes were collected by the Sheriff's Department. In fact, you were at the scene and you knew that these were given an identification number of item 13 in the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department evidence collection numbering system. Is that correct?
Yes.
For this case, and it was given a unique number to track through the system. Is that true?
That's true.
Okay, and the top two tables show the reference sample results along with the genetic markers that are associated with that. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so when you obtained this item, where did you obtain it from? In other words, how did you come into possession of these 2 eyelashes, and as far as testing is concerned?
Well, they were transported back to the laboratory when I returned that first night. And I believe they stayed in my possession the whole time until I analyzed them.
Okay, and when you saw these on the first occasion, they were, as they were depicted here in this photograph, they were on the top of the toilet tank, essentially. Is that correct?
Yes.
And they, somebody who saw them, I'm not sure if it was Mr. Kyle or somebody else, said they appeared to be safe, taken off and placed there. In other words, they weren't out of place as far as, well, they appeared to be placed there. Is that correct?
Right. They were just sitting on top of the lid.
Okay, and you looked at this, and did you see any blood that was associated with this particular item?
Nothing visual, no.
Okay, and did you do any type of presumptive testing that would suggest that the blood associated with these eyelashes?
I did not.
Okay, and did you type, or did you extract these eyelashes and try to get DNA into a tube and take it through these 5 steps that you previously discussed?
Yes.
And were you successful in getting a result?
Yes.
And did you get a mixture of 2 people's DNA?
Yes, I did.
And looking at, let's look at the amylogenin in the box next to it. Let's highlight that, and we'll just discuss that for a moment. No, the whole thing. All the way down. Yeah, thank you. Okay, and this is one genetic marker and the boy-girl marker together that we're showing now, that we're highlighting, correct?
Yes.
And because there's more than 2 alleles in the evidence sample, which is on the bottom, you know that it has to be a mixture. Is that correct?
Yes.
And you compared this mixture with the known samples for Philip Spector and Lana Clarkson. Is that true?
Yes.
And does all of the DNA, is it accounted for in this particular evidence sample by a mixture between Lana Clarkson and Philip Spector? In other words, if you take them together, does this account for everything in the evidence sample?
I believe you're asking me is the types that.
Okay, and so there's nothing foreign as between both of them, is that correct? In other words, nothing that comes from some third person other than the 2, is that true?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
And essentially, the majority of this sample comes from Lana Clarkson.
It's almost done. Cut it out.
Is that true?
Possible, yes.
Okay. There's no way to really know exactly how the DNA got on her eyelashes, but you can, basically, there's several different possibilities. Is that true?
Well, the DNA, the major part is from her, so we know the DNA that's consistent with her came from her own cells. But the foreign DNA that doesn't match her and is consistent with Phil Spector, we don't know what type of cells that is from.
Okay, so it could be from, you trace contact. In other words, some of Mr. Spector's DNA is on her body, on her hands.
That's a possibility.
In fact, there's a lot of research that's been done in the forensic science community that you're familiar with that has actually studied that. Is that true?
Yes.
And in fact, they, using the analogy we did yesterday with the pen, they've actually studied people touching an object and then testing the object and finding their DNA.
Yes.
Okay, and in this particular instance, for example, the brandy snifters that were collected, there were mixtures of DNA on multiple items of Mr. Spector and Lana Clarkson. Is that true?
Yes.
And let me give you sort of an example of how something might get transferred. You tell me whether or not this is correct or possible. Let's say that Mr. Spector handles a glass, and later on, Ms. Clarkson has possession of that glass. Could some of Mr. Spector's DNA get from the glass to Ms. Clarkson on her hands?
Yeah, in the realm of anything's possible, that is a possibility, depending on how many skin cells the initial donor put on them. But again, for the items you're speaking of, the brandy sniffers and the ginger ale bottle, I did not sample the area where a hand would usually go. I sampled the areas where your lips would usually touch if you're drinking from a glass or from a bottle. I purposely stayed away from the hand part of those types of items.
Okay, and there was one of those glasses, one of those brandy sniffers was in the bathroom, is that correct?
Yes.
All right, at this time, we're going to break. Keep in mind the admonition, ladies and gentlemen, 15 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, before we go, I want to show you something. Remember I told you I was allergic to animals? That is what my leg looks like right now. See the hives in the middle right there? That's from Spike sitting on my lap. Just those few minutes. My leg is itching like crazy right now. But I love them so much. Yeah, I'm fine. My leg just itches. I'll be okay. It'll go away in a little while. But I love them. I can't help it. We found out, okay, most people that are allergic to animals aren't allergic to poodles. That's how we found out that I'm allergic to dogs. My first time being around a poodle, my face couldn't breathe. We were at my brother's house. Well, not his house. He was house sitting. He was in the army. He got married, but I guess my dad couldn't get off work or something. I don't know the whole story. I was 4. There was a family reunion in Oregon. Like, not close family, like cousins and my mom's cousins and stuff. Not close family at all. Like family I've never seen again in my life. I don't remember these people. I don't know these people. But I was 4. We did like a road trip. I don't even remember where all we went. We went like across the bottom of the unit because like I'm in Florida. So we went the bottom of the United States and then up the West Coast. And then I think we came down kind of like over the top and then like down that way. I'm not even sure where all we went. But my brother was in the army and he got married. So we didn't go to the wedding, but then we went and we stayed with him in Washington. He lives in Oregon now, but he was stationed in Washington. He was house sitting for somebody, like one of his superiors in the army, and he had a poodle. And so I had an allergic reaction to that poodle. And at the time, you couldn't get Benadryl over the counter, but my sister-in-law's mother had a prescription for her son. And my sister-in-law and her son, her little brother, their age difference is like me and my brother. So her little brother was my age. So we played together and stuff. His name's Clay. He was a cute little kid. We were about the same age. I don't think I've ever talked to him again. Every once in a while I see pictures of him on Facebook. But so she brought over the liquid Benadryl for me, and it worked, and it was peppermint flavored. I think that's why I don't like peppermint. I've never liked peppermint. I think it's because of that medicine. That's just my theory. I don't know if it's right or not. So that was how we found out I was allergic to dogs, and it was to a poodle. So I don't know why I was allergic to a poodle, because like the ones that you're not allergic, like cocker spaniels, I'm not allergic to cocker spaniels, Bison Frige, the ones that they have hair instead of fur, the ones that their hair grows and you have to take them get their hair cut, those you're not supposed to be allergic to. I was allergic to a poodle though. I don't. It may have been. Also, it could have. Well, I don't know. I was gonna say it could have been because it was in Washington and maybe a different atmosphere with the dog's fur. I don't know, or hair because it was a poodle. I don't know. But anyways, that's how we found out I was allergic to dogs, because they had a poodle. I don't know. But okay. So, anyways, thank you guys for coming out. If you're gonna watch the burned and battered trial, I will see you over there. I think I set it up to redirect, but I really can't remember right now. So, if I did, it will take you there. If I didn't, find me. I think I did though. I was running late this morning, so I really can't remember if I did it or not. So, it could have been different pollens that I wasn't used to. Yes, I have a dog. I have 2 dogs. I love dogs. Well, the plan was I had a dog. I had 2 dogs, not at the same time when I was little. Um, Knowing that I was allergic. The first dog I had, my brother gave to me because they got it and didn't know that they couldn't, my other brother, my youngest brother. They got it and then they found out they couldn't have the dog in their apartment. So they gave it to me, and this is when we lived down south in Sarasota, and they kept it in the garage so it wouldn't be in the house where I would be allergic to it. But they never could potty train it. I was little. They couldn't potty train it, and now how every kid's toy is made out of that good sturdy hard plastic. Back then everything was made out of cardboard, and I had like this little play kitchen and a play house and all this stuff, and it was all made out of cardboard. Well, the puppy chewed up everything, peed on and chewed up all my toys and everything, and they were just fed up with it, and they brought it. We used to call this the farm because it was a working farm when my dad was little. So we brought him up here to the farm, and it I mean it's not a terribly long trek up to the highway, but for a dog, I guess it is. And I don't know if he was trying to come back home, like he didn't realize how far away North Florida is from Sarasota. But I don't know where he thought he was going, but he went up to the highway and got hit by a car. So that's what happened to that dog. And then the other dog I had was after we moved up here. He just showed up out of the blue, and he was my little buddy. I love that dog. They would not let me bring him inside the house. I was a teenager, and he just disappeared just like he showed up. He was there one day, and the next day he wasn't. We looked all over for that dog. We never could find him. And I was like, Dad, did you take that dog somewhere and drop him off? Because my dad did that with animals. When he got done with an animal, he would just take it somewhere. That's people that are raised on a farm. That's the way they feel about animals. They're just things. And it hurts me because I'm an animal person, but that's the way farm people are. And he's like, no, I swear I did not do anything to that dog. And I'm like, are you sure, Dad? And he's like, I promise I didn't do anything to the dog. But we looked all over for that dog and could not find that dog. I have no idea what happened to that dog. But allergic to both of them. And then after that, I was like, okay, I'm just going to have cats. And allergic to cats too. But like my body, I got used to the cats to where I'm not like super, super allergic. like I was saying one day, I was talking about my allergy test. They had to do like a deeper test because I didn't react to like the superficial skin test to the cats. They had to do like a deeper test for me to react to the cats, which I said was not fair. um, but like now, Belle, I don't have that reaction to Belle, and I don't know why, because they have the same dad, and Belle's sister is Spike's mom. So I don't know why I react that way to Spike, but not to Belle. It's weird. It's really, really weird. And I don't act that way to this one at all. That's being a little teased today. Shadow. She comes and meows to be petted, and then I pet her one time and she goes away. She's like, you held me today, so I'm going to be a tease. Okay. I'll see you over there, guys. Bye.